So welcome to Bunny's Designs. This is a live stream with live peoples. It's recorded for Ustream.tv and also for YouTube for people to watch at their leisure. I'm working on a sketchbook, and it's quite good quality sketchbook paper. It wasn't very expensive, but it will allow a little bit of a wash onto it. So it's normally like the sea white extra wet strength is what to look for. I've drawn with my little 0.25 rotring pen in rotring Indian ink, which is light fast and water based. It won't smudge basically with water. It's not water soluble. It's permanent. I've looked through my pastels. This is the vintage set of pastel pencils from Derwent, but you can match the colours up to whatever you want. I'm using a darker olive and a lighter olive. And I have quite a strong blending tool, a clay shaper, extra firm. The black ones are quite good for colour pages, but if you were using this on proper pastel paper, which just kind of has a tooth to it, you'd want a softer one, a grey or a white. But because we've got to grind this into the paper because it's shiny, then it only works if you can really get to grind that colour in. So I've just scratched on the surface a tiny bit of colour, and then I've kind of manipulated that in there. So there's dark olives and olives for this particular section. Now I have found an indigo, but I did want a touch of warmth to my little brambles. So I'm going to put one dot, and I'll zoom in because it's kind of tiny, this. You can see what I'm doing. And hopefully we'll still be in focus. So I'm just putting literally one dot in the middle of each bramble, and this one is ultramarine, and I did want a purple. See if I've got a purple. There is a burnt carmine out there. Burnt carmine bold. I think I might just put a dot of that in each one as well, and a dot of the ultramarine. And then just go in there and see what that does. To those little brambles. So you can do pinky red ones, you can do all sorts of colours, because the brambles actually kind of come out at different times. They're not, some are always kind of red when the other ones are being eaten by the birds, so I kind of liked some kind of dark colours. But you can put as many colours together as you want. And again, I kind of like that idea. You're not stuck with 3 watercolours because you'll get mud otherwise. You don't with this. So you can do this 2 ways. You can do it with a blending tool, but if you didn't have a clay shaper, as they're normally in the clay moulding section. This is by Sovereign. They are quite expensive, and I thought I was buying bigger ones, and they were tiny when they arrived. So the black one is the extra firm. If you're using it on ordinary paper, you need extra firm. Kingo says, how do I clean it? I use a baby wipe, and I normally have it on a flat surface. I've got ink on mine, but it'll be fine. And I just draw it across. Now the black one is more difficult to see, so I'll see if I can do it with the thing is it's too soft, is that this one, but you just draw it across a damp baby wipe, and then it comes off on your fingers. Skin seems to be quite good, but the majority, but it's got to be the hard surface. But keep the baby wipe away from your colour book because it will buckle it. And then just make sure there's nothing on there with your finger. And that tends to do the job quite well. So because this is down this side, it's not set this, it's just it's not set, so you've got to be a bit careful with it. I'm actually going to put green. Now this seems to be kind of, these colours are a bit insipid actually, they're not kind of bright colours, but so you can't put your hand on this because it will smudge, which is why I'm working right to left, because I'm left-handed, but if you were right-handed you would work in the top left corner first, and then you're not putting on your hand on the work you've just done because it will smudge. So I'm trying to get one dark dot for each kind of little berry. So you can do one berry at a time, or you can do all of them in this way. And this is how I did the Hagrid's page. If you want to see how to do this, I'll just show this really quickly. This was the Hagrid's page, and this took quite a long time, quite a few hours. I think there's 8 videos on here. And I think it's the only one. I always get them mixed up. Oopsie. This is with pastels. Again, it's about 16 colours, scratched really next to each other on every single brick. If there was slightly more green, because I used a photograph, so if it was quite slightly mossier or darker, I'd use slightly more of one colour than another, but there's about 16 colours. Just a dot, and then you smudge it. But this technique takes a long time, but you get a really nice effect. So then I want a little bit of that kind of blue to kind of give it a bit of oomph. And then I'm using a little bit of burnt carmine to kind of purple it up a little bit. So these brambles are very dark. And so you just fill the entire space. Now I've left a little bit of space. Because it is a tiny area, is that? It is a bit of a tiny area, so you just manipulate. Now if you go over, don't worry, because we've got a magic eraser which we can use. So again, one dot in each one. So if you wanted a more bluey effect as a shadow, put the blue at the bottom and the indigo on the bottom as well, and you just need a touch. And as I say, you can use as many colours as you want. I think I used about 16 in each brick. And the way I did it, which I don't know if it's the right way, but that's the way I made up. You you completely fill. There isn't a scrap of white left. Now you may have used white as a highlight, but there's pastel on all of it. And then when you blend it together, you get a really nice effect. Now this small space I would normally do with a little tiny brush. You can do it that way, or if you don't have a, and I had one in my hand the other day, there should be one in, I leave one in the pencil case with the pastel pencils for this particular reason. So with my pastels in my art bag, I have a little Winsor Newton water brush. It's a real diddy little brush. It's a diddy brush, but it's perfect for pastels, for tiny spaces. So dunk the brush in water, twist it to a point, and then just go in there and manipulate, so you can get some really soft effects. And the beauty of this way of doing it is that now is set. It's set with water. Go to the next one, and the minute you touch the pastel, it isn't a true watercolour, but it reacts like a watercolour, and when it's dried, it's set. Now actually I think I prefer this kind of almost unblended section, because you can manipulate the blue first. Now that has been blended. I am just using again the damp brush twisted on a baby wipe. It's barely damp, and then you can stroke the entire thing in one, because you don't want to blend it anymore. And that's instead of using fixatives. That is now set. That pastel is now a watercolour, and it's dried. There's some particles floating about, and you can see, and using a tiny brush is always easier, but you can use the rigger. You can't use a water brush, it's too fat. You want something that's just going to be barely damp. The last thing you want to do is to wet your page, because it's not designed for too much water, but it will take a little soft brush with a small amount of water, and you can go along and colour everything you've blended just once, just gently, and it's set. You don't need anything else. You don't need any sprays, any fixatives, you don't need anything. And you can work over the top. And the other advantage is when you're doing small leaves and you are picking up colour, because you are making this pastel into a watercolour, so you've got colour to manipulate if you haven't got, if you've missed a spot, kind of thing. So it's very good for tiny spaces, and it means you don't have to sharpen the heck out of your pencils. You don't need a point. You can just manoeuvre, and by doing so you create a little watercolour effect. You've got a highlight. just at the moment using a blending tool's a little bit uncomfortable. So when it comes to this leaf here, you wouldn't bother with this. You would use a rigger. And my pastel, my paintbrushes are in here. And again, I use normally three riggers. There's my number 3 here. The number 3 graduate Daler-Rowney rigger is quite a nice size, so it gets damp, twist it to a baby wipe, it becomes just barely damp, and then you stroke the entire space once. Dunk, do it again. Now, one thing I should have done is taken off where I went over, and I forgot to do that. In the Hagrid page, I think there's 8 videos. Most of them are an hour long, a couple are 2 hours long. And the other thing which makes everything really good, and they're obviously not here because I took them out. Give me a second. So 2 other things I have with my pastels is a derwent sharpening guard and also an eraser. So if you've blended something and you haven't set it, you can erase it. So if you go over, it's not the end of the world. Now if you've set it in water or anything else, you can't do this, but that's why it's a good idea to just get that first. So just go around. I mean, some will come off, but not if it's very, very, very strong. And then I usually have a big brush because of the eraser, but if you can see, I can rub this now. And it's set, so technically that will not go anywhere. It's set. So I'm actually probably going to work with a paintbrush rather than this, because unfortunately just at the moment my hands aren't particularly brilliant. So I shall just be rubbing it in, I think, and using a slightly bigger rigger. I think this pen might do as well. It doesn't have to be a rigger, but it can't be a big fat water brush because they kind of release water in a big rush, which is not a good idea for a colour book. Now this is sketchbook paper, so this will actually, this is fine, but normally you don't get this thick paper on a colour book, colour page rather. So I pulled out some different colours for that. I've got olive green, and this is the vintage set, so we've got a pale, a dark and a medium. So I like the idea of the middle of the vein being pale and possibly pale on the outside. The nice thing about pastel pencils is you can just kind of scratch a little bit of colour on, and then I think we can have another bit. Sorry, bark alert. And you're really not pressing on. You've just got to scratch the surface very carefully. So then the medium one I'm going to put in the middle. So you end up without any white, so you can put as many colours as you want. I've picked quite muted colours for this page. Not quite sure why, but sometimes it's quite nice. Now a lot of pastels are vibrant colours, and they're kind of in your face a bit. So I've done that. So as I said, you can blend them with a little blending tool. Some people use face makeup little buds. So I'm going to do it with a rigger today, so it's going to be really set. Start on the outside and just manipulate that colour and then bring the dark in. And then you can push it to the edges and be a bit more precise. So again, it doesn't matter if you don't get all the colour right to the edge. And this is the same technique almost as the scratching colour for the neos. You know, you don't need to get to the edge of a neo, you just need the pattern, you just need a little bit. And the other advantage of doing this is one is all the bounce is in the brush, it's not heavy on your fingers, and you are fixing the pastel as you are manipulating it around. So when you've finished, that leaf is set, because by using a damp brush, because pastels are really the nearest thing to pure pigment. That's why most of the really soft ones are expensive, because they have less binder and they're almost a dust, because that's what pigments are ground to, almost a dust. So if you work this way and you've got asthma, again, that's quite good, because you're not making bits. These pastels are not being scraped. You've got tiny little bit there, and that's all you need. You do have to dunk the brush every time, because if you dunk in the brush and you go from light to dark, you have colour here now. It's not a watercolour, but it's turned into a medium that reacts like a watercolour. So we'll do the middle section again here, and it's a barely damp brush. Every time I'm dunking in water and twisting, so most of this water's come off. You want it to be about 2 or 3 seconds before it dries, if you really want to be that precise. So manipulate the pale and then go in there for the green, the darker green. Now, I'm a bit used to some really dark, bright colours at the moment. I've been working with hydras, so it's a bit alien to me, is this at the moment, and you'll probably find that when this is set you can work over the top of it, but not straight away, because this page will be slightly damp, and pages do not like to be wet more than once. So I would leave this, and if I wanted to borrow it some more, I would go in there another day. And that is dried and set. It is now set. There's no chemicals, there's no spray, there's no hairspray, no fixatives, just water. So again, this is another way of working, so you can do each individual leaf. So that's the darkest one. Now, if you were to scrub a lot, you get a lot of dust. And dust is pigment, and we don't want to waste pigment. So and you don't blow it away because you want it on your page. So just put that line down there. And you could add white if you wanted to put white on there. That would give you a really strong highlight. So again, clean brush, dunked in water, twisted. And that's barely damp. And you can then manipulate it to the edges where you don't have a lot of colour. This one's a bit darker because it's behind that one. Again, twist. It's a good idea to get into the habit, and you could really turn the page so that your hand's at a nice angle because it's easier for you. Never try to do things with your wrist twisted because you'll go over the edge of your page if you do that, because it's almost impossible. And then we can just put a little bit of dark in that one. So I don't really like these colours, but I've started it now, so I'll have to carry on. And sometimes this happens, which is why you should always have a bit of a practice. I haven't used these for quite a while, so it's always a good idea to have a bit of a practice. So I'll leave those, but I might like it when I see it with the pales. So I've got French ultramarine. Now, as I say, this section says dark, medium and faint. So we've got a very pale blue, we've got a palish ultramarine, and we've got almost a very dark cobalt blue. And so we're going to have a bit of dark in the middle. But you can put dark in any bit. You don't have to have the highlight on the outside. You can have the highlight wherever you want. Now with the Neo, you would just put the dark one in the middle, and you can do that with this as well if you wanted. If you put the dark one in, you'd have it strong here. Oops. You've got to twist it to a point. You kind of go in, and then you're manipulating that colour around. You have a really nice petal effect if you hadn't have dropped it back. Again, clean the baby wipe, start in the dark bits. The reason I'm doing that is I'm actually blending them out. Instead of doing it with a blender, I'm doing it with the paintbrush. So I'm getting a little bit of variation on the leaf. So just because you've just got pastels, don't think you haven't got any watercolours. You could also scratch colour into a pan and add water, or a well, and you would have a wash. So if you wanted the sky, a wash for sky, you can do that with these, as you can with the Neos, and you can do it with watercolours, ink tens, anything that's water based. You can scratch it into a puddle of water and get a wash. So I kind of like that. I don't know what it's going to look like when it's finished, but it's a strange phenomena actually, because when it's the first time I've really done this, and when you start to create a painting, you normally have a rough idea of what it's going to look like. If I was going to do this for a long time, I would tip water into a lid, because it's a lot easier just to flatten your brush like that, completely submerge it, twist it, and then use it straight away. You can't mess about because it will dry, and then it won't mix all the pigment. So you want to kind of use it almost straight away, and then you can have a watercolor effect. So dunk it, twist it. And it's only a watercolor, so you can go back in with some more color tomorrow or another day. You can work on the top of it. It's not a fixative as in a varnish. You're just fixing this pigment. So it's not a watercolor, but it reacts like a watercolor when you add water to it. So again, you've got that watercolor effect. So you don't need a blending tool. There's two different ways to work. There's the Hagrid's page work, and this isn't what these are supposed to be used. These are supposed to be used on pastel pencil paper. If you tell anybody you're putting it on a shiny surface, they'll probably lock you up. But it seems to work, and it's very, very soft on your hands because you're not scratching a lot of colour, you're just doing a little bit of colour, and the rest is going to be easier. I've done quite a few videos, I think, with this on, so if you look for Derwent pastel pencils in the playlist, there's a couple of different ways I use them. It all depends on how well my fingers are, my hands. If you wanted a bigger highlight, you'd start from light to dark, but I kind of like that. So if I might do the bigger ones the other way around, and then they'll look slightly different. So push that colour around. So these are really, really soft colours, these. Just scratch a bit of colour. So if you were doing Neos, that would be far too much, as I found out last week. You want the tiniest little bit, and then you could manipulate that out. But this is pastel. And there's no reason why you couldn't put white on the outside if you wanted to make a different highlight. I'm not going to do that now because I've started and it would look slightly odd. But on the edges of everything, if you wanted a really bright highlight, you could put a scratch of white. But I kind of like this little soft way to do it that way. And again, brush clean every time. Unless you're going from very pale to dark, then you can get away with it. But it's a lovely soft blue, is that? And we want a nice natural blend as well. If we can get a nice soft blend, it's always nicer. If anybody got any questions, just put them in caps so I know to read them. So thanks for joining me, guys. I hope everybody's alright. It's been a little bit miserable. Oh, yes, it is miserable now. We have strange weather. One minute it's nice, the next it's miserable. And I think this year we've gone from summer to winter in one foul sweep. We missed autumn completely. because it's normally my favourite time, and all the trees go russets and reds and browns. So pop that into there. And you can work with a tablespoon of water, so again, it's a nice, easy way to work. If you wanted to scratch the colour first, you could, but you must put greaseproof paper or tracing paper or baking parchment in between, because this pastel will rub off. So if you've probably got tiny amounts like this, it would be alright, but if you were doing some vibrant colours, it probably wouldn't work, because you've just got that little bit more. I don't think I'm going to put a highlight at all on this one. I think I'm going to leave this one dark. Oopsie. And 3 pencils is normally enough, so you want a dark, a medium and a light tone, which I'm sure if you look through your supplies you could find that either in Neos or watercolour pencils will do the same. And if you carry on mixing, you get a dead flat colour. Which I don't like, but I probably will. And if you didn't really want to keep picking all these up, you could do all the dark areas, and then you could do all the light areas, and then all the mid-tones. And then you could just carry on blending with the brush and you wouldn't need. So this time I'm going inwards. To push that dark into there. You start quite light and push the dark into there. So these are going to be really, really pale, really pale, and apart from that one, that one's too much, and it's dried. Now that is not a pastel anymore. It's the middle one. And depending on how light you want it, if you just left the tips without anything, you would just be manoeuvring that bit into there. And remember that damp rigger releases more water very gently and will create a natural highlight. You have to remember to dunk your brush and twist it to a point every time. But as you see, there's very little water wasted. Whoops. Sorry, there's very little pigment wasted. So if you want to create some shadows, put your pencil in before you do this. And you could go in there with Neo and make these really, really sharp if you wanted with something else. You don't have. You can use mixed media. You don't have to just stick with pastels. So you could go in there and do all this. You've got to be a bit careful that you didn't put your hand on it though, but because you will smudge it. But and then you've got your next colour. And I think we put a lot of that one in that one because it's behind it, so. And a lot of that one in there, and that one. And that one just wants a touch. And then lastly, this one. So if you do each one slightly different, all the petals will look all slightly different. And that probably will give you a bit more of a natural look. So I can put the pencils down and we can concentrate on this one. It probably would smudge if you were careful and didn't put a lot of colour on. Then you could do this, scratch the colour on, do the whole page of the whole book, and then you could go away and leave the pencils at home and colour in. And that's the lightest way to travel. If you didn't want to make one of my little colour books with all my water-based products in. I think these colours are kind of growing on me now. And again, sometimes you think, oh, I've made a mistake, but if you keep just going with it, you can always rectify it later. If I come back to this in a few days' time, that paper will be as dry as anything, and I can put anything I want over the top. Bright colours, I could put neos, I could put ink blocks, I could put hydrus, I could put watercolours, I could do what I like with it. But just for a day or so, it needs to dry out naturally. And you've also got a day to look at it. If you look at something, if you make a mess of something, go away, look at something else, and then come back, and it's like having fresh eyes. We used to do that if we thought we'd made a mistake on our 6 and 5 foot canvases. They're physically tiring as well, and so we used to just go away, have a coffee, come back, and then you can reassess things. You're not going to get upset with yourself. Same with the colour page. If you do a page and think, oh, I really don't like those colours, then shut the book or go to a different book or a different page, do something else, and then the next day or next week or the next time you go in that book, you might look at it and go, oh, I like those colours. I don't remember doing those. It's not like me. And you will like them. So this particular one is actually growing on me. It's growing on me now. I think it's because I'm not really happy with the shapes. So I'm not really happy with colouring it. I think there is that element in it as well. I think if you're not, and that's why it's impossible to start painting until the drawing is correct, because your brain just does not want to do it because it's a waste of time. So all that pastel is now a watercolour, a really soft watercolour. And it was the greens, wasn't it, that I did to this. So again, I'll scratch the colour and palest on the outside and in the middle. And it's very rough, is that. And then in between each one, I put a line of dark. And then I have a mid-tone. And if you use colours that are really near each other, you get a soft blend. And if you use very, very different colours and shades and tones, then you get a different effect. You get a much different effect. And again, you can manipulate this colour once it's become a watercolour. Sorry, the other dog is rearranging his bed. Apologies. It is a small zoo around here. Sorry about that. Grandma just looking for my birthday card that didn't arrive. I only got one card. It was like, well, okay, nobody likes me, that's fine. I couldn't believe it last year. Everybody's cards came. So either the postman's on holiday and we've got somebody new, or I'm in love this year. So we want kind of a bit of dark under there. I don't think I like the leaves. I don't like the colours. So I'm going to have to rethink this. I think I don't like the shapes, so I might have to rethink. Because if I was actually doing a composition, I wouldn't do it like this. So it's a bit alien to me, is this, at the moment. But my original art class is still going in Rickle, that I went to. It's been 10 years ago now. So I might go back to there, and then I can go back to doing traditional watercolours, which I haven't done for a long time. I think it must be 10 years since I've done a watercolour. I don't think I did one for my degree either. Nope, I don't think I did one when I did my degree. Never mind. So don't think, Oh, thank you, Claudia. I like the hydrangeas, but I don't like the leaves. But it may look completely different. We'll have to see. It may look completely different. So I'll put that on there, and then again, just a little bit of dark between. And then we'll do the medium colours. Now you've got to remember, if you've got asthma, you don't really want to scratch too much colour. We just want the bare minimum. You don't make any dust. I kind of like working like this. If you don't clean your brush, you lose your variation. I think you don't get a crisp start. So it is better to do that if you can. So I did try to scan this in so that I could have put it on my Facebook group for people to download and my blog, but I don't think it's scanned in right. But let's see what's happened to it. So I thought, so if you want to download it, and then you could colour it in proper colours. So you can either leave those kind of variegated areas, or you can get rid of them. Oh, hi Beth, welcome to Bunny's Designs. This is pastel pencils, derwent pastel pencils. Just put that. Oops, I need to make a drink in a second as well. So these are derwent pastel pencils. So let's see if I can zoom in. Oops, zoom out rather. If I zoom out, you can see how I'm working. I've got my baby white there, my top there, so I'm kind of just dunking and twisting, and then I'm just moving the paint about. And this is a number 3 Dale Rowney rigger. So the smaller areas, I'll be using a smaller brush. I think this is the biggest one. So just see how long we've been. It's just going up to an hour. So we scratch just for a few more minutes. But it is quite an easy way to work. Just a little bit of colour. And because it's pastel, the Derwent watercolours you could do as well. Derwent Inktense pencils you could do. But the pastel absolutely glides off. And so if you've got really poorly hands, this is the way to do. Scratching just that little bit of colour, stroking the page, and there's no pressure on your hands at all. I think I'll do that one green. This is where you decide where you want your shadows. If you want any shadows, I'm going to put a shadow there, I think. And then the medium tone goes everywhere else. I like to colour it, most of it, in pastel, especially if you're blending, because if you can't see any white at all, you know that's good. And that probably works better for blending. You can get away with manipulating it with a damp brush if you don't want to blend it first with a blending tool. You just want to do it with a paintbrush. I'm just going to put a little bit more dark under here. And then we know that that's going to definitely be kind of dark. So dunk in the brush, twist on the baby wipe, and then manipulate the colour. Alfie. And you can put the shadow in later. You don't have to put it in straight away. You can tell if it's a bit wet, just take some water out and then manipulate the colour. You can go a lot slower than me, but I'm trying to finish. So you can get some variegated leaves. Manipulate it right to the edges, because obviously you didn't scratch it to the edges, so you can have a really nice and when you feel that your brush is getting a bit dry, it doesn't last very long, so you need to go back in. Now that was a bit wet, but you do have some colours to manipulate. So we've done a blackberry. We haven't done the toadstools yet, but they're fairly pale colours. So that's the end of part 1 of my sketchbook with derwent pastel pencils. Thank you for watching.